Let's continue this discussion with Firas Maksad, the Senior Fellow and Senior Director for Strategic Outreach at the Middle East Institute. Firas, really appreciate you being with us. Let me pick up where our Ben Wiedemann, I'm not sure if you could hear him, where he left off, and that is that incredibly dangerous moment for Lebanon, indeed the region as a whole, he was pointing out. The IDF issuing more evacuation orders, not just in Lebanon, but also, as you've seen, in Gaza. Implications on Lebanon front of a broader ground attack and not the limited offensive, of course, that the IDF had stated. How do you assess this moment for us?
Well, Isa, obviously, on the eve of the anniversary, the first year since the October 7th attack, one has to start by saying that the leader of Hamas, Yahya Sinwar, and the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, got the war that they both wanted. From day one, Sinwar wanted to expand this war so that Hamas is not fighting in Gaza on its own, to drag in Hezbollah, a much more capable force, into this war, to drag in Iran. And we're talking today about an Israeli response to Iran, a direct Iranian-Israeli confrontation. And at the same time, Benjamin Netanyahu wanted his opportunity to underscore that he is Mr. Security and to readdress the balance of power in the region against Iran, to take a blow to that Iranian ring of fire around Israel, including Hezbollah in Lebanon. So unfortunately, a year after the October 7th attack, the Middle East today is more dangerous than it was a year ago. In Lebanon, Israel. Go ahead. No, in Lebanon, Israeli military officials keep saying that this is a limited incursion to create some sort of buffer zone. But again, the Lebanese have a long history of Israeli incursions that end up being not only just invasions, but also years and years of occupation. And so when these warnings that Ben Wiedemann was talking about to evacuate large swaths of Lebanon, some 25% of the country, when those warnings are issued by Israel, that evokes 1978, 1982, when the Israelis went all the way to Beirut and laid siege to the city. So Israel has done quite a remarkable job striking blows to Hezbollah's leadership, decapitating the leadership, killing Nasrallah. But a ground invasion is a whole different ballgame that changes the narrative. And it's quite telling that even Hezbollah, despite the blows that it's been dealt, is still putting up quite a fight on these border villages. A week in, Israel can't seem to make much progress.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you about that because, like you said, for us, Israel has had plenty of tactical victories, and we've reported on this, we've discussed this. It's, like you said, decapitated Hezbollah leadership, going after Hamas for almost a year. But today we saw both attacking Israel again. In the last few minutes, in fact, we saw Israeli military saying that it intercepted a surface-to-surface missile fired from Yemen. So Houthis here. How effective, in your view, has Israel's military strategy been in trying to weaken Iran's proxies, be it the Houthis in Yemen or even Hezbollah or Hamas in Gaza?
Isa, there's no doubt that Israel has delivered devastating blows to Hamas and to Hezbollah, less so perhaps the Houthis, but Hezbollah really is the cocked gun in Israel's head, the Iranian gun in Israel's head, and the first line of defense the regime has should Israel decide to attack it and attack its nuclear installations. So it's not insignificant that they have essentially been able to decapitate Hezbollah's military leadership. What we're seeing today is Iran being more directly involved in the direction of Hezbollah. Let's remember that in those bunkers, together with Nasrallah, who lost his life, top Iranian generals have also lost their lives. They are directly involved in this war. So increasingly what we see with Hezbollah is a decentralized organization where the foot soldiers on the border are defending their own villages, and one can expect them to put up a valiant fight in that regard. But the leadership in Beirut is increasingly under the direct control of Iran, and it's increasingly apparent to most Lebanese who do not want this war that this is an Iranian-Israeli war that's unfolding on their territory.
Let's talk about diplomacy, or the failures, I should say, of diplomacy. I don't know if you heard, for us, President Biden on Friday basically implying that Israel shouldn't strike against Iranian oil fields. Though important to point out, of course, that Prime Minister Netanyahu hasn't heeded much of President Biden's advice. Do you think Israel retaliate? How would you think it will retaliate, given that we are so close to a US election, of course?
Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind that the Israeli retaliation is coming. Again, this is Benjamin Netanyahu's opportunity. This is the war that he wants to have as Mr. Security, and he will have it. Now, from an American standpoint, obviously, during an election, a contested one, a very closely contested one, President Biden doesn't want to see oil at $200 per barrel. And the Iranians have made it very clear that whether directly or indirectly through their proxies in Iraq and elsewhere, they will attack regional oil installations, other oil installations, to cause that global price of oil to skyrocket. So there's an American aversion to that. Whether Netanyahu actually takes that into consideration or not is an open question. One would certainly expect that he can go after IRGC targets, after military targets, besieged targets that would only deepen the divide in Iran, given the internal resentment against the regime. But whether he will go beyond that, I think, is an open question.
Very quickly, because we're running out of time. I mean, we've heard so much about military successes. We haven't spoken much about any sort of peace plan. I mean, who do you think can bring the region back from a war, really, from a broader war here? Because so far it seems to have failed. We're not hearing enough about this.
Yeah, Isa, the irony is that the pathways towards a more peaceful outcome are very clear, and it does involve, the return of the swap of hostages for prisoners between Hamas and Israel. And in Lebanon, everybody understands that there's UN Security Council Resolution 1701 that ended the last war, which, by the way, also calls for the disarmament of all militias in Lebanon, and that includes Hezbollah. That will then unlock a pathway towards an election of a president in Lebanon and rebooting the political system there. So the pathways are very clear. The political will is not there, and the US administration cannot unlock these in the absence of the will amongst the local players. So Netanyahu and Sinwar and Hezbollah. And that will is not there. And they understand that there's a window of 2-3 months now until a new president is elected and a new administration takes office on January 20th, where pretty much the region is afloat.
Firas, Maksad, as always, appreciate your analysis. Thanks very much, Firas.
Thank you.
Now, 1 year later.